Hello friends. This is Movie Man. Today I'm going to tell you about the mystical horror film The Lazarus Effect. The events take place in the city of Berkeley, California. A group of medical scientists are conducting experiments at the university. Among them is a married couple, Frank and Zoe. Frank is essentially the leader of their team. Assisting the scientists are the young guys Nico and Clay. At the very beginning, we see experiments being done on pigs. They try to bring the dead animal back to its senses by injecting a special serum into its brain. For a moment the pig seems to move. But what really happened is unclear. We are introduced to a group of scientists. They have a new addition to their lab. Zoe brings in a young girl, Eva. Eva is now in charge of filming the experiment. She records every step so that there will be evidence of the great scientific discovery later. Originally, the guys were looking for a cure to help coma patients come to their senses more quickly. They used the Lazarus serum they discovered. But their research grew into something bigger. They set out to find a way to literally bring people back to life. The thing is, Frank got a grant for his original project. He signed a contract and accepted all the conditions. But it clearly states that experiments on animals are strictly forbidden. That's why now the research has turned secret. One day, wanting to continue, the guys take on the task of resurrecting the dog. They put the body on a table, hook it up to machines, and inject the serum. This is followed by an electric shock. The scientist tries to revive the dog, but nothing works. Frank gets upset and shrugs his shoulders. But Eva, who films the whole process on camera, says the dog seems to have just moved. Zoe tries to convince the girl it's just a muscle spasm. Only a few seconds later, the dog jumps to its feet and begins to break loose. The scientists calm her down and rejoice in their victory. They got a living creature back from the dead. But is it worth rejoicing? The animal behaves somewhat strangely. It wants absolutely nothing to eat, is not interested in anything. In addition, the dog, which is given the nickname Rocky, loses the cataract in his eyes, which was in the past life. Clay suggests that their serum may also cure diseases. Frank and Zoe take the dog into their home. The next day, the boys begin to examine the dog vivaciously. Tests show that the serum has not disappeared from the brain even though it should have yesterday. It builds strange new synapses in the animal's brain. The dog is now becoming more aggressive. In the evening, the strangest thing happens. Clay stays in the lab. He smokes his e-cigarette, turns on some music, picks up some chips and sits down at his computer to play a little. Suddenly the gramophone stops working. The guy hears a sharp sound. He turns his head and sees an empty bottle roll out of the kitchen. The cage where Rocky was sitting not long ago is unlocked. In the kitchen, the refrigerator is open and all the contents are scattered around. Clay tries to find the dog. Soon he comes by himself and starts literally throwing himself at the guy. Later, he tells his coworkers what's going on. No one understands what happened and how the dog could make such a mess on his own. The next day, the rector of the university summons Frank to talk to her. She claims she knows about the animal experiments and demands that the project be shut down immediately because it is illegal. Frank is puzzled. How did the woman know about this? He believes that she was paid by pharmaceutical corporations who realize that they want to take their profits. Soon unknown men come to the lab and confiscate everything related with the experiment. They are representatives of a large pharmaceutical company who now own all the data due to Frank's violations of the conditions prescribed in the grant. Zoe first blames Eva for what happened. She finds it strange that the problem started when she arrived. Frank stands up for the girl and explains to the team why they are so eager to get out of here. The scientists ponder for a while and realize they don't want 3 years of research to go to waste. They decide to sneak into the lab at night and conduct the final test. Luckily they manage to stash some serum to continue and only need professional equipment. They manage to get inside by tricking the guard. They also hack into the cameras so no one can track what's going on in the lab. That night they try to revive another dog. The experiment begins. Everyone is ready, but something irreparable happens. An electric charge hits Zoe directly. She falls to the ground breathless. Frank checks and realizes she has no pulse. He tries to resuscitate his beloved, but all in vain. The whole team is scared and scrambling around the lab not knowing what to do next. Frank musters up the courage to put his spouse on the testing table. Everyone around him realizes what he is up to and tries to talk him out of it. But the man does not want to back down and asks his colleagues not to let him lose his wife. The comrades are perplexed but agree to proceed. They inject a serum into her brain and start giving her a small dose of current. Nothing happens. Then Frank commands them to increase the charge. Nothing happens again in response. Suddenly, Clay notices on his laptop that a security guard has disappeared from his post somewhere. He's gone to make his rounds of the building. Frank is excited and doesn't want to stop, but the guys talk him into hiding. They wait for the guard to leave and sigh. When Frank realizes it's okay to go on, he goes into shock. His wife is sitting on the research table covered by a sheet. What he has longed for has happened. She is back. Zoe doesn't feel well after being revived. She can't believe it happened to her. At first, Frank is incredibly happy that he was able to get his wife back and the serum really works. When Zoe comes to her senses a little, she tells him that after she died, she went to her own version of hell based on a nightmare from her childhood. Back then, during an apartment building fire, she saw neighbors unable to get out of the fire because the door was locked. She claims to have been there forever, not half an hour like she really was. Frank orders tests and monitors his wife's condition. The CT scan shows the same results. The serum didn't dissolve but remains in the brain. However, the overall condition is much improved. The body seems to have restarted. Frank tells me to turn off the tomograph and repeat the tests. In a couple of hours, Nico looks at the image of Zoe's brain. It begins to acquire new facets and abilities. The woman can use it much more than ordinary people can. She is now endowed with telekinesis and telepathy, as well as increased aggression and insanity. Frank tries to talk to his wife and calm her down. He's well aware that he's done something stupid and now he has to make it right. Zoe also notes that she has changed considerably. Objects move, she can manipulate the lights in the room, and read the others' minds. She knows that Frank doesn't really think this whole situation is normal. Nico and Clay regret that they gave in to the boss's entreaties, and Eva is very agitated at this point. She thinks she was wrong to agree to be filmed. She shouldn't even be there right now. Zoe soon tells her husband that something is wrong with her. She's literally finishing sentences for him, letting him know that she reads his mind. Frank injects his wife with drugs to help her get some rest. She goes to sleep, but in the meantime, Eva's mind is inhabited. The girl has a vision that always haunts Zoe, with a fire, with the door closed and her neighbors burning. When Eva wakes up, she realizes that she is lying on the floor. She doesn't know how she got there and tells Frank what happened. The man looks at the girl's hand and sees bloody marks. These are the aftermath of the vision of the girl being grabbed by a hand from the flames. Frank can't stand it, accuses the girl of lying and walks out. Nico and Clay try to figure it out. They believe the girl and begin to further question the validity of the experiment. Clay bandages Eva's wound and explains that Zoe probably got superhuman abilities. It's hard to believe, but that's the reality. Soon Nico checks the security system. Turns out someone has been tapped into their system and has been constantly copying data. The worst part is that the last connection was 20 minutes ago. Frank realizes that they are being watched and these people already know what is going on. He orders them to pack up and get out of the lab. Looking around, the guys realize that the dog they brought back to life has disappeared. While everyone is busy looking for Rocky, Zoe wakes up. She rises above her bed and her eyes turn completely dark like an alien. Before waking up, she has seen her childhood nightmare again. Nico notices that the lights in the building begin to flicker. Suddenly, Zoe approaches him from behind. The woman was previously cute to him and so now she tries to seduce the guy. He pulls away and looks fearfully at his colleague. Zoe says that the guys don't realize what they've done at all, but soon they will. She suddenly disappears, locking the guy in a room. He tries to get out but can't. The girl locks the boy in a closet and starts squeezing him with her mind. He's bleeding out. Zoe goes back to the common room as if nothing had happened. Clay, Frank, and Eva are already waiting there. The guys are frantic and can't figure out where their comrade has disappeared to. Clay lashes out at his boss claiming that he ruined everything. The guy reaches for the phone to call security. Suddenly the power in the building goes out. Clay says there's something wrong because the phone couldn't have just blown a fuse. Now the guys are trapped in the building because the system blocked all the exits. The men leave to look around and Zoe turns to Eva. She reads the girl's mind and tells her directly. When Clay and Frank return, Eva can't stand it and starts yelling at her comrades. She claims that after Zoe's return, something went wrong and that she was the last person to see Nico. Clay approaches Zoe and demands to know what happened to his friend, but it's not the answer the guy expected to get. Zoe's mind forces an electronic cigar down his throat. He begins to choke and falls to the floor. Frank grabs the tongs and tries to get it out of there but is no longer able to help the poor guy. Soon the lights go out throughout the building. Zoe is missing somewhere, and we see the room is a complete mess. Frank calms Eva, who is extremely agitated and frightened. The man gives her a syringe of sleeping pills to help calm Zoe down. The whole place is in chaos, objects start to move, everything is upside down. Frank takes another syringe and goes out looking for his wife. He spots her at the end of the hallway and runs toward her. He asks his spouse to talk. They embrace, but the woman reads Frank's mind, who wants to kill her knowing that she is no longer his beloved wife. Zoe then squeezes his head with all her strength and thus mercilessly kills him. Eva is left alone in a dark room with a super strong colleague. She draws herself another syringe of solution and wants to go in search of him, but strange voices are heard around her. The girl leaves the room and cautiously walks down the dark corridor with a flashlight, trying not to breathe. Suddenly, a gramophone turns on in one of the rooms. The music ominously bursts into the lab. Eva finds the right room and turns off the music. Single objects occasionally move on their own. The girl looks around fearfully. Suddenly out of the darkness appears Zoe, who has already injected herself with more serum into her brain. Her power is now limitless. She puts her hand out in Eva's direction and literally pushes her into another dimension. The girl ends up in that burning house. Little Zoe stands in the middle of the hallway and watches as the neighbors try to get out of their apartment. Eva approaches the little girl and asks to see what she has in her hand. It turns out there have been matches there all along. Zoe's whole trauma is that she was actually the one responsible for the house fire. Eva reassures the little girl that it wasn't her fault and that everything will be okay. She forces the little girl to open the door where the neighbors are locked in. Little Zoe opens it and we see a solid beam of light that literally engulfs the super strong adult Zoe. The light slowly dissipates and Eva stabs a syringe into the woman's chest. She begins to breathe heavily and falls to the floor. A frightened Eva sits down next to her. Rescue workers rush into the building. The man in the uniform asks Eva how she is. The girl cries and turns her head sharply. Zoe's body is no longer where it was. She looks back at the rescuer and sees Zoe's face there. She grabs the girl and twists her neck. In the final scene, we see the corpses laid out on the floor. Dead Frank is already lying on the research table. Zoe takes the Lazarus serum and injects it into him. The man twitches and comes back to life, and that's the end of the movie. What do you guys think? What do you think of this story? Unfortunately, I have to say goodbye for today. Don't forget to subscribe and like it. See you on the channel again. Bye.